F1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
A 2.5-hour plane journey from Bahrain, and F1 has arrived in Saudi Arabia for round 2 of the longest season in Formula 1 history. And it's the Jeddah Corniche circuit we find ourselves at, the second longest on the calendar, and at 27 corners, the most of any track. On the waterfront area next to the Red Sea lies this fast, unrelenting street circuit with the walls perilously close, and the first track action of the weekend beginning shortly with free practice 1. My name's Harry Benjamin, and alongside me, guiding you through all the coverage, is former Formula 1 driver Jack Aitken and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. And Andrew, I think we need to kick things off really. Lots of news off the track to do with Christian Horner and Red Bull, and also separate allegations involving the president of the FIA. Can you bring us up to speed with where we're currently at?
How long have you got, Harry?
5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll be quick. It emerged straight after the race in Bahrain that Jos Verstappen, Max Verstappen's father, had said that the situation regarding Christian Horner was driving people apart, and it cannot continue this way and wasn't good for the team. I spoke to Jos Verstappen after that, and he said that he'd made the remarks after a fallout with Christian Horner in Bahrain. It's also worth mentioning that in Bahrain, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, went to Max Verstappen and asked him to give Horner his public support. I've learned that Verstappen responded by saying, "You should do your own investigation." Since then, I've broken 2 stories about Ben Sulayem's conduct from a whistleblower that's reported these matters to the FIA. The first is that he allegedly interfered with the race result in the Saudi Grand Prix last year by asking for the stewards to overturn a penalty given to Fernando Alonso, and the second was that he allegedly asked his officials not to certify the Las Vegas track. Since then, Max Verstappen yesterday in his news conference said that his father was not a liar, in quotes, adding, "Of course, as a son of my dad, it would be just weird to be on a different side, but I just want to focus on the performance side of things." It was a very accomplished performance by Max Verstappen, where he said quite a lot between the lines but didn't say it explicitly. This afternoon, it has emerged that the woman who accused Horner has been suspended by Red Bull. The company said they can't comment on an internal matter. A spokesman said that claims Horner's wife Jerry was involved in the decision were absolutely incorrect. BBC Sport has learned that the reason given by Red Bull to the employee was that she'd been dishonest. And a deep breath.
Well, thank you very much for that, Andrew. I think that really does give a nice summary of what's happened in literally the last week since Formula 1 kicked back into action for 2024. This is an evolving news story and breaking news as well, so do keep up to date with all the very latest on the BBC Sport website and app, and indeed we'll, I'm sure, be covering more of this in the Checkered Flag podcast a little later on to preview this weekend, which you'll be able to hear wherever you get your podcast, and of course on BBC Sound. Right, we're edging closer to the beginning of free practice 1. Now, Jack, obviously there's off-track distractions for Max Verstappen and Red Bull, but that didn't seem to stop him from winning in style and in pure dominance in Bahrain. We now come to Saudi, completely different track though, and actually it's his teammate Sergio Perez who actually on paper has the better form around here with 2 poles and a win.
That's very true. I mean, we would love to see someone challenging Max. He's continued that impressive form that he had all of last year into this season. Nothing seems to have changed. Right at the front of the field, there are a few teams chasing Red Bull that seem to think that they're a bit closer than they were this time last year, but there is obviously still a gap. So Checo's the main man for challenging Verstappen, and this track is probably one of the most enjoyable on the calendar, I think, from a driving perspective. It's really, really fast, second only in average speed to Monza, which is quite amazing considering it's a street circuit and you have all of the dangers that go with that. There's a lot of blind corners, a lot of very high speed sections that link into each other, and I think they're going to have a lot of fun out there this weekend, hopefully, despite everything going on off track.
Yeah, I've heard it described as a cross between Spa and Monaco. Ultra high speed, but then a narrow strip of asphalt in between the barriers that you rocket through 250 kilometers an hour as the cars begin to get fired up and make their way into the pit lane to begin free practice 1. Let's just bring you up to speed with how the Drivers' Championship looks after one round. It's Max Verstappen on top, 26 points to his name, 8 clear of his teammate Sergio Perez. Sainz third, Leclerc, Russell the top 5, and then over in the Teams' Championship it's Red Bull on top, kicking things off off in style with a 1-2. They've got 44 points, 17 ahead of Ferrari. Then it's Mercedes, McLaren and Aston Martin, the top 5 yet to get off the mark. Sauber, Haas, RB, Williams and Alpine right at the very back of the pack as cars are out on track. Lewis Hamilton comes out in the pit lane, goes right towards the end and then pulls over to the left, ready for a practice start. Clears right out of the way of the fast lane as the two Saubers make their way through, and a nice clean start. A little bit dusty out on track. It's the daylight at the moment. It will be a nighttime race come Saturday. Just to reiterate, the race will be on a Saturday once again. The last race that will be held on a Saturday this year. I'll just get the first two out of the way. And for those who wish to do a sync up, it's 59 minutes and 14 seconds remain of this free practice 1 session. So Jack, I mean, we've had the form book laid out to us from Bahrain, but it's a tricky one to gauge. I think there's a lot of teams that I don't think we quite saw the full potential in Bahrain. Do you think we'll see a little bit more here in Saudi about what that pecking order is, particularly in the midfield?
I think it's a yes and a no, because it's a bit of an oddity as a track, the Bahrain circuit, so it's not always the greatest predictor for what's going to happen later on in the season. Having said that, Jeddah is also not your typical circuit for Formula 1, so it could still be that we have a bit of a mixed impression of the grid this weekend, and then after this we start to get more of the true form of the field coming through.
So Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari team principal, he said it would take until Melbourne to get a full picture, and I can see where he's coming from, because then you've got 3 different circuits, Jack, haven't you, with 3 very different characteristics, which basically between them probably encapsulate most of what you would get on a racetrack throughout the calendar.
Yeah, even Melbourne historically in isolation is not a great form predictor as well, is it? So it is true, they probably need that sort of culmination of those 3 events to actually get an idea of where the strengths and weaknesses for each team lie.
And a Ferrari out on track at the moment. Melbourne, of course, will be happening not next week, but the week after, as round 3 of the Formula 1 calendar, before we then head to Japan, China and then Miami will be the 6th round before the Europeans begin in Imola. And Ferrari, I think, were quite buoyed by their performance in Bahrain, and Charles Leclerc with some problems. His signs first.
20 kph headwind on the main straight.
20 km/h headwind on the main straight. Carlos Sainz is reporting and he heads round on a lap. How does that affect you as a driver?
The wind's a massive part of how you approach the track in these cars. You're so aero dependent that even a 20 km/h headwind, which is pretty, I would call that moderate, without being too gusty, it's going to give you a lot more downforce as you head into the braking zone of turn 1. It gives you more grip. You can hit the pedal harder, go later on the brakes. Conversely, as he now turns into the tailwind section of the track and comes back on the other side of the circuit, it's going to take grip away. It picks the car up effectively, lifts it where you're, looking for grip in the middle of the corner, and it can actually make the car unpredictable as well.
Carlos Sainz, they're saying after Bahrain, he feels like he's finally got a car that he can attack with as well, which gives him a lot of confidence going in. Charles Leclerc looked so quick as well. His Q2 time in qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix, if he replicated that in Q3, would have been enough to challenge for pole position. So the 2 Ferraris certainly looking quick.
Would have been enough to be on pole.
He would have done it, yeah. So it just gives you that little perspective of the fine margins within qualifying. Okay, yes, in the race, it was slightly elongated with Verstappen's over 20-second lead come the end of the race, but Sainz then comes across the line to finish his lap time, and he puts on a 1:34.826, so that puts him 5th, and the opening lap times coming through. Lewis Hamilton currently fastest with a 1:32.5. Then it's Pierre Gasly, Bottas, Albon, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Sainz, Zhou, the 9 drivers who have set lap times. Everybody is out of the pit lane, with the exception of Logan Sargent in the Williams, the American in his 2nd season now in Formula 1, but he's just about to get sent on his way. And And Jack, you have experience with the old Williams steering wheel from a few years ago, where they had the digital dash sort of embedded in the chassis almost, not on the actual wheel. They've changed that now, and it's all as one. Can you give us a bit of an insight into why they went with the previous design anyway, and the benefits perhaps of now integrating it within the wheel?
The main benefit of having it integrated into the chassis, into the tub itself, rather than attached to the steering wheel, is that even when you're in the middle of a corner and you have steering lock on, the dash is still right there in front of you, facing the right way up, and if you were so inclined, you could look mid-corner at your settings. Obviously, you generally got your eyes on the road at that point, so it was, a bit of a iffy reason. The wheel would be a bit slimmer as well, was probably the other main benefit. But yeah, they've now gone the way of all other teams and integrated it into the steering wheel for the first time, but it wasn't without issues in the first race, as both drivers had problems with the dash on their steering wheel.
Yeah, power unit and steering wheel problems, particularly exacerbated with Logan Sargent, who locked up in turn 4 in Bahrain, the right-hander, and then went straight on and almost looked like he was out of the race at one point. Williams have since confirmed that an uncommanded brake bias movement was the reason for that, where he had made an adjustment on the steering wheel, I think Logan Sargent, for brake bias, but what happened was not what he commanded it to do, and that's why he went so dramatically off the track. Yeah,
you can actually see it on some onboard footage that has since come out, that it went forwards by over 30%, and just to put that in context, as a driver, you're looking at 0.5% increments of brake bias, so 30% change is just ridiculous, and it's no wonder that he lost control of the car. But yeah, hopefully they'll get those gremlins out of the car. Sometimes when you make changes like that, especially with the rotaries, the switches that rotate around, if you get the rotary caught between two settings, that can send the system a little bit haywire as well.
Yeah, first track action kicking off, but it's the off-track controversies that are stealing the headlines and possibly a distraction with the all-dominating Red Bull team. Reigning champ Max Verstappen rocked away to victory last time out in Bahrain. He'll be looking to do it again here this weekend, but it's actually his teammate Sergio Perez who has the better form around this Jeddah Corniche circuit. Coverage of FP1 live now on 5 Sports Extra, and Perez has just gone top. Back with the track action then here on 5 Sports Extra for free practice 1. We're just getting a little look at Carlos Sainz having a bit of a moment in his Ferrari. That was coming into the left-hander, the banked corner, I think that was at turn 13, where you then start to go back on yourself in this Jeddah track. Or was that the final corner?
It might have been the final corner, because actually we had seen Verstappen have a very similar moment about halfway through the corner. It is mostly a tailwind at that part of the circuit as well, so the driver's struggling to get on top of the car there. We're now watching Hülkenberg taking his horse around the middle sector of the lap and screaming down that really, really long back straight, DRS open, and this is where the tailwind kicks in, and you get even more top speed as you come into that final corner. You have to adjust for that as a driver, and he goes wide as well.
Nico Hülkenberg with an exceptional qualifying to kick things off, getting that Haas into the top 10. It didn't pan out for him in the race, having an incident with Lance Stroll in turn 1. He just goes 9th fastest, about 7.5 tenths off of Sergio Perez, who holds the current fastest lap time, a 1:32.0, set on the hard compounder tyre. Then it's Gasly, Leclerc, Albon, Verstappen, the top 5, Hamilton, Alonso, Piastri, Hülkenberg, the top 10, as Russell goes up to 2nd, and that is how the top 10 currently looks for FP1. Norris, Sainz, Bottas, Tsunoda, Magnussen, the top 15, Stroll, Joe, Ocon and Sargent now 20th and last. Everybody out there now on a mixture of the hard and the medium compound of tyre, middle of the range that Pirelli have brought this time around. Degradation was a big factor in Bahrain, not so much here, Jack?
Less so, yeah. I think the tyres tend to perform a little bit better. You have less stop-start here. It's a lot more flowing. It's a lot more lateral load rather than longitudinal. So you can manage the tyre a lot easier as a driver in those situations, just by knocking off a little bit of speed in those high-speed sections.
This is the sound of Fernando Alonso, who is currently on a very fast lap, fastest than anybody in Sector 1 and Sector 2, as he makes his way towards the left-hander, the final corner of turn 27. the most amount of corners on any track here, and he crosses the line and he goes fastest with a 1:39.61. Pulled it out of the bag last time in qualifying, but a 9th and a 10th finish for Aston Martin. Alonso ahead of Stroll. Seem to generally lack pace at the moment.
Yeah, it almost looked like Fernando was trying to save his tyres for a lot of the race and hold back and not get sucked up into the fighting, but that never came good at the end.
That's exactly right. He was saying yesterday, Jack, that that actually the degradation was quite high, but they were just hanging on as long as they possibly could for what he called a kamikaze strategy, just in case the safety car happened or something. And of course, the safety car never did happen. But he said he reckoned it didn't make any difference to their end result because they just weren't quick enough. They were the 5th fastest car and they finished in the places. Here's Ocon's radio.
Got bouncing in the first sector, not the best.
I mean, the first sector here is one of the places where you have the fastest sequence, the biggest changes of direction as you go from turns 5, 6 into 7, 8, 9 to 9. Wow, we're just getting a replay of, is that Stroll it is, clipping the wall.
Oh, and touch on the wall.
Wow, a bit more than a touch, I think. That was a clatter. He hits it with the left front wheel going through turns 23, I think it is.
Yeah, it's coming through the middle sector. I think it's coming out of 22 and the left-hand kink of 23.
That's the quickest corner on the track, basically. In fact, it's made it slightly slower for the second race because it was so on edge in the first year in Saudi Arabia. But first of all, that's not a place you want to be having any kind of accident, Jack. But also, it's kind of weird because he hit the inside wall, didn't he?
Well, it's one of those corners that they've got a few of here, which is it's quite sharp, but it's still very high speed, and it leads onto a very long straight as well. So exit speed is everything. And the more that you can cut that apex and get closer to that wall, it's kind of an exponential effect of how much time it gains you. If you leave a meter, you're going to lose tons of time. So the drivers are forced to play chicken with the inside walls here.
It was Ocon on the radio a few moments ago talking about complaining about bouncing in the first sector. We saw some bouncing in Bahrain as well, and that subject has been brought up again in the pre-race press conferences, particularly between George Russell and Max Verstappen. They want and are calling for the F1 cars to be raised, Andrew, are they? They're not happy with the new rules that the FIA might be mulling over for 2026.
So to be absolutely accurate, it wasn't in the press conference. George said it to Rosanna in Bahrain, and then I heard that Max had complained about it in the driver's briefing in Bahrain, so I went to see him on race morning in Bahrain and had a chat with him about it. But yes, you can read all about it on the BBC Sport website, absolutely right.
But it wasn't in the pre-race press conference,
it was
my apologies.
Definitely not in the pre-race press conference. But what they're saying basically is that the cars are being run too low. And Russell described it as when they set off at the beginning of the straight, the ride height is about the length of a AA battery, and by the time they get to the end of the straight, it's the diameter of a chickpea. And so every bump they really feel, and both of them are saying it's unsustainable basically because the amount of force that's going through their spines basically every time they hit a bump is really, really high. Now, I also spoke to James Allison, the Mercedes technical director. Again, it's in the same story. Allison's view is that the cars can be raised, should be raised, and that he was actually really critical of the FIA and their approach to car design. He says they're still focused on this idea of the wake effect, which was the whole principle behind these new rules that were introduced in 2022, which, by the way, was supposed to close the field up and make Formula 1 more competitive. Didn't really work. Well, the field is closed up, but one team happens to be miles ahead of everyone else. But so his point is that you can have ground effect cars with Venturi tunnels, but you don't have to have them so low. It's just that the way these particular cars have been created within the rules forces them to run them low. He says if there were other things they could do to make ground effect cars be able to run higher, which would be fine, but the FIA aren't interested in that. They're just focused completely on this wake effect thing, which is all about having the airflow that's produced by a car in front not disturb the car behind as much as possible. He says it's been proven that this wake effect thing is a red herring basically, or as he called it, tilting at windmills. And he says that they're ignoring the tyre effect, which I think most people in Formula 1 think is probably the biggest reason why cars can't follow, because the tyres just overheat, because they're Pirellis and Pirelli haven't done anything about it for 14 years despite being repeatedly asked to. I don't know what Jack thinks about this, but so Allison was quite outspoken on that, and you can read about that in this story.
what Jack thinks.
What do you think about this, Jack?
I was making a bit of a face as Benny was giving us the lowdown there. Pirelli tyres have a characteristic which, although they have changed a lot of things over the 14 years, I would say that main characteristic of it being quite a fragile tyre in terms of the surface temperature and being able to overheat that doesn't seem to have gone away over the years, even if degradation levels have increased or decreased. And that's, as you say, critical when you're following another car and you're in that hot wake and sliding more because you don't have the downforce. But that's also not going to change anytime soon, is it? Because Pirelli are here to stay for a while.
They are, and equally I know Verstappen and Russell and those drivers who aren't happy with the bouncing, and the FIA are supposed to be, I believe, finalising the 2026 rule sets by the summer of this year, so trying to apply a little bit of pressure to see if anything can be done in time for that. 44 minutes and 20 seconds remain of free practice one. It's George Russell who's currently fastest, a 1:38 on the hard compounded tyre. Then it's Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, Gasly the top 5, Hamilton, Perez, Sainz, Albon, Norris the top 10, Ocon, Piastri, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Bottas the top 15, Magnussen, Joe, Hulkenberg, Sargent and Stroll 20th and last. Work going on at Aston Martin after he clipped the inside wall coming into the left-hander of turn 23, one of the fastest corners on this track. So he's come back into the pits, and this is the sound of Sergio Perez on a lap, losing a little bit of time in the middle sector. He's coming into the final corner now, the left-hander, turn 27, one of the main overtaking points of this track, and then it's a drive to the line, the pit lane entries to your left, and Perez crosses the line and does find time in that fastest final sector, fastest of anybody, and goes 5th fastest, make that 6th because Lewis Hamilton crosses the line and goes up into 5th.
He did have a little bit of a tow from another car that was going slowly on that back straight, which no doubt would have helped. But we had a lovely view from the visor cameras that they've installed in a lot of the drivers' helmets now, and just showed how much buffeting the driver gets as he goes down the straight. Just trying to hold your head up, keep your eyes locked onto the road ahead of you can be a challenge sometimes in these cars. And actually, the drivers have a host of different spoilers which they can attach to their helmets to try and affect this airflow. And that's something that they do a lot through pre-season testing. But it's looking like we've got a slightly different form from Alpine, in particular Gasly up there in P7 and Ocon not too bad either in P11 compared to where they were in Bahrain. That must be a bit of a relief for them.
Well, I suppose it's also early days, isn't it, in free practice one, and we've only had...
They'll take anything.
They'll take anything at this stage, and it's been a big week for Alpine, having been the slowest in Bahrain, and almost in reaction to that, there's now been a big technical restructure, and indeed the technical director Matt Harmon and the head of Aero Dirk de Boer has now departed the team. They have resigned, and Alpine have brought in now a 3-pillared structure. Here's Hamilton.
You got to fix the rear bouncing, mate.
Okay, copy.
Hamilton, you've got to fix the rear bouncing, reporting that back to his engineer Bono. So not happy with how that Mercedes is currently making its way around this Saudi track. So just to finish off, Alpine have now got David Wheater in as their technical director for Aero, Joe Burnell, technical director of engineering, and Kyron Pilbeam remaining with the team, but now technical director of performance.
Also, Harry, you've forgotten something, because Bob Bell,
yes,
who was working in a kind of advisory capacity at Alpine at the moment, has also left the team. Now, Bob Bell is a former Renault technical director. He's highly accomplished, very, very well-regarded engineer in Formula One. He was technical director when Fernando Alonso won 2 championships in 2005-2006. He was briefly team principal when Flavio Briatore was sacked after the Crashgate scandal. I'm sure Jack knows him well. And he has now gone to Aston Martin as executive director technical. And I know people up and down the pit lane think that is a big loss for Alpine and a big gain for Aston Martin. Jack?
No, agreed, yeah. I mean, he's one of those names that's been an institution, frankly, at Enstone for 2 decades now, really. So it's a massive loss. And It's definitely a bit of a crunch time for Alpine. It feels like we've been saying that for a while, but they came in mid-2010s with a 4-year plan. I remember because I was at the launch as part of their academy, a 4-year plan to win the championship, and obviously that's been extended out slightly.
Then it was, what, 100 race plan? How do you solve a problem like Alpine? That's the biggest question, really, isn't it?
It's never good when you have people leaving who have been a part of the team, such an integral part of the team for so long. One of the other names that you mentioned there, Kyron Pilbeam, he's a fantastic engineer and someone that I sat next to for a long time as a reserve driver, my seat on the wall as it were, and guided me through a lot of the technicalities of F1. So it's good to see him still there, and director of performance is ambiguous, but it sounds important, so yeah.
Do you think Alpine can recover within this season, or is this, when you look at it from a Renault perspective as well, obviously they're the overarching backers, and Alpine is the brand they're wanting to use Formula One to promote their sports car brand. But when you look at where they are now, Bahrain was their worst results in qualifying since 2016. Here's Verstappen.
Slooster.
Max just having a big old wiggle in turn 17, I think it is 16 into 17, and he was passing traffic very closely on the way into it as well, so a bit of a tough lap for him there. And we're now getting an onboard with the Ferrari of Sainz, who gets really badly blocked by one of the Williams. We don't see who it is, but luckily he's on an in-lap anyway. But going back to the Renault/Alpine situation, it's very tough. It's a team that's lost momentum. They seem to have been making steps forward, but in the last year or so it's stalled out a bit. And
as the driver's perspective, it must be hard to keep any kind of optimism, because you're seen as the main stars of the team, and you can't get out of the car and be demoralised. You've got to almost sort of bandy around and bandy the troops, a bit like Ocon was at the end of qualifying, trying to be positive, but that's got to be hard, hasn't it?
Definitely, and I think we saw that Ocon was very positive at the end of that quali session and trying to G the troops up, but Gasly, I think by comparison over the weekend, was pretty honest in his reactions, and he was frustrated, not necessarily angry at the team but just at the situation. They were fighting for the front of the midfield last year, and now they're nowhere, and as a driver it's really hard to take that, to find the motivation to get out there and fight for 19th or 18th place. It's a completely different mental game.
37 minutes, 32, 31, 30 seconds remain of free practice 1, and I think the majority of cars are in the pits, with the exception of the two RBs of Tsunoda and Ricciardo. I think they are the only two cars out on track. They are indeed, and
they're not close to each other.
They're not close to each other this time. Well, you've gone there, so why don't we go there? Strategy call in the race towards the end in Bahrain. Both cars trying to get past Kevin Magnussen. Ricciardo was on the soft tyre. Tsunoda wasn't. They called for the switch. Tsunoda wasn't happy. He did eventually move over. Ricciardo didn't get past Magnussen. And then on the cool-down lap, Tsunoda basically showcased his frustrations and got a little bit too close to Daniel Ricciardo. They both said that they have spoken about it with the team and that everything is fine now. But what did you make of that scenario there for the two RB drivers?
I just thought it showed, not for the first time, quite a lot of immaturity from Tsunoda, and it's a real shame. I think it's pretty disappointing whenever you see a driver trying to use their car like that, as he did on the cool down lap. He at the end of the day, putting aside the any safety implications, if he made contact with Daniel, as he came very close to doing so at a time when drivers are not the most alert, because you're at the end of a long race and you don't expect to be fighting for position. If he'd made contact, that's a long night ahead for the mechanics to fix the cars before they're going to pack them up, and completely pointless as well. And listening to the interviews afterwards, they had spoken about that scenario before the race, so Tsunoda was aware there would be a strategy difference. Even if the pace of Tsunoda wasn't that different to Daniel, it's quite possible that the team just wanted to see if Daniel could unlock something in those few laps before the end, and if not, they may have reversed it anyway. I mean, they didn't get points either way, so I just think it was very short-sighted, and a bit disappointing to see that.
Yeah, and it is, you said it's not the first time we've spoken about Tsunoda and his maturity. He's definitely matured since that first season, but if he wants to be taken seriously as a contender for that second seat at Red Bull, that is something he really has to get on top of now, because the amount of times I think we've brought this up in FP1 commentaries over the last season and a half, that is the main thing that seems to be just holding him back a little bit. He's currently 11th fastest, Ricciardo out there as well, he's 7th fastest, and from Bahrain, it looked nip and tuck between them. Tsunoda actually looked quicker. Ricciardo wasn't happy with his qualifying, said he didn't get the best out of himself there. So we'll see how things unfold across this weekend. Very different circuit, low downforce, ultra high speed, narrow as well. And this is the sound of Fernando Alonso as he navigates his way through turns 6 and 7.
Keep going, Harry. The turns just keep coming at you through this sector.
The 27 million corners that make up this Saudi Arabian track.
It's a brilliant section of the track. I think it really showcases the commitment that you need to have here, because in an age where runoffs are increasing and safety is increasing, and that's obviously brilliant, this is a track where you cannot get away from the walls, and they're really intimidating, frankly, at the speeds that you're going at, even for these guys who are superhuman. And you have to carry the speed, you have to commit early to the throttle before you can see the exit, before you can see that exit wall. And knowing your car and the line that you're taking and being absolutely spot on are crucial to being quicker. And Fernando doing a good job through the fastest real corner on the circuit, we should say. And heading now down towards the last corner, we can see there's some flags showing there's still a little bit of a tailwind. It's hard on the brakes, manages to avoid the snap of oversteer that others have been having, but just gets a little bit wide back on the power and towards the finish line.
Across the line for Fernando Alonso, finds a bit of time in that final sector, 1:31.0, stays 5th fastest, 4/10 off of George Russell's fastest lap time. 3 DRS zones around the Jeddah Corniche circuit in that run down from turn 24 all the way down to the final corner, turn 27, then again on the main straight, but also in between turns 19 to 22. The roller coaster section in the track. Quick lap time now, sticking on the soft compound tyre. Lando Norris comes speeding through turn 18.
Yeah, he's on an absolute flyer now with the soft tyres and heading towards turn 22, the one where Lance clipped the wall on the inside. We'll see if he can shake the car up a little bit better. He's a 10th up on Russell going through the sector 2 line. Takes a nice bit of exit curve on the way out, no major dramas, so he's got one final corner and he's got a long time to think about it. That's the other challenge here. Long straight means you can overcomplicate it in your head, looking for that final braking point. It looks like he gets on the brakes okay. Car looks pretty planted, very nice on those soft tyres. Keeps a little bit of margin to the exit wall, still not full attack for qualifying mode yet, but across the line he goes.
And it's fastest for Lando Norris, a 1:34.24 on the soft compounder tyre. A man who has had a best race result here of 7th back in 2022. And was a little bit worried, I think, coming into this weekend that the car might struggle with particularly due to the front end on the McLaren, but looking quick on that soft compounder tyre. This is the sound of Alex Albon, who just had a little bit of a moment coming through the middle sector as he now makes his way through the quick left right-hander of turn 23, then into 24, and on the approach to the final corner, turn 27.
He does look a little bit more on edge compared to the McLaren of Norris. Had, like you say, a bit of a wiggle in the middle of 17, which is not where you want to have it, because suddenly the wall comes up very quick, and it does so again for him at the last corner, getting very close to the exit wall. He's definitely pushing the boundaries a bit more early on in the weekend here.
Yeah, and Albon has also switched onto that soft compounder tyre, gone 3rd fastest with that lap time, just under 3.5 tenths back from Lando Norris's lap time. And we were talking about the steering wheel problems down at Williams earlier on. Should say that Williams have introduced a temporary fix for this weekend, with a permanent one coming hopefully for Australia, and some power unit cooling issues as well going on with Albon's car last time out in Bahrain, and just struggled on the turn-in on that last lap into turn 27. Had to have a couple of goes on the steering wheel and then got oh so close to the wall on the outside.
think that's about as close as you can get without actually making contact. It was pretty impressive, but it also showcases that as soon as you get off the rubbered line here, it gets very dusty very quickly and you lose grip very quickly therefore as well. And he almost certainly wasn't intending on getting that close this early on in the weekend, but just got drawn out as he tried to get on the power. So still very tricky out there for these guys, and it's going to improve a bit as the weekend goes on and rubber goes down. More support series doing laps, getting rid of that dust. But it is a low grip track by nature.
Yeah, how much are we expecting to see when it comes to track evolution? Because obviously we're going to go into the night, the temperatures change as well. More rubber not only from Formula 1, we've also got Formula 2 and F1 Academy kickstarts its second season as a championship. How is that going to affect FP2 later on today and then getting into Friday's running?
They've already had a couple of sessions on track this weekend so far, like F1 Academy and Formula 2, so the track's not starting from zero, which helps them a lot. But it also means that the evolution to FP2 isn't going to be as massive. Actually, more of the evolution is going to come from that time of day when it gets a bit later, track conditions a bit cooler, maybe a more favourable wind condition, and that's where the lap times really start to pick up.
Joe Guan Yu on a lap at the moment in the Fluoro Green Sauber. And Joe, with a very respectable race in Bahrain, it has to be said, as he wrestles that Sauber through turns 9, then quickly into 10 and 11. And before you know it, you're coming into the banked left-hander of turn 14, about a 12% gradient. As beautiful scenes as the wind flies and right on the coast of the Red Sea. But Joe finishing in 11th, one place out of the points, and a brilliant start for him actually. And Sauber, who were happy with their race pace, one lap pace. Alessandro Alunni-Bravi, the team representative, saying it's something they definitely need to work on now.
Yep, but like you said, very solid first weekend for Joe, and putting Bottas under a lot of pressure, I would say, for team leadership, as it were. And he's been a consistent improver over the last season, so it'll be interesting to see if they can get that car working over one lap pace, if they can start to challenge for the points a bit more. It does look very competitive in that part of the midfield this year.
It really does. One tenth can almost catapult you up a couple of positions as Joe comes to the line. 16th fastest for the Chinese driver. He's out on the soft compounder tyre at the moment, so lost a bit of time coming through the middle sector. I thought he had a bit of a snap there. Coming through the right-hander in the first sector, I think that is, or early on. Sparks flying from the underside of that Sauber, just getting a little bit loose.
As soon as you have a wiggle like that in that high-speed section and it puts you offline by less than half a metre, you just have to back out immediately, because the speed is so great that that distance offline is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and before you know it, you're onto the dusty stuff and you're in the wall. And there's a pretty nasty exit curve there as well, which will ground out the car, and it'll be like you've got no steering basically, and it quickly leads to an accident. Now following Max Verstappen through the same set of corners, no such dramas for him, using all of the track on the exit of turn 11. Pretty impressive to see the car mounting the curb there. He's purple by just over half a tenth in sector 1.
Makes his way through the left-hander, slightly banked corner of turn 13 on the power all the way through it. On that soft compounder tyres, currently 5th fastest. He's going for a quick lap at the moment, as you say. About half a tenth up on Lando Norris's quickest time at the moment. Now heading in the rundown through turn 19, slight right-hander of turn 20. The DRS is active, the flap on the rear wing is wide open on the Red Bull, and then it slams shut under braking as Verstappen makes his way through the left-hander of 22, out through 23 and along in the final DRS zone towards the 27th and last corner. It's a slightly curved straight that brings you to that final corner. Gets as close as you dare to the outside wall. He's hit that wall before. Qualifying, cast your minds back to 2021 where he clipped the wall and ruined a chance of pole. He doesn't do that this time around. Crosses the line, 4 tenths up and goes fastest. Max Verstappen to the top of the timing screens as a wry smile approaches from Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes. Is that a wry smile at how quick Verstappen was, or is it a wry smile that George Russell is going quicker in the middle sector? Nice tidy lap so far from George Russell.
Yeah, George Russell actually had the fastest sector 2 before he just beat it himself, so Verstappen wasn't able to better it on that lap he's just put in. We'll see if George can match him in the final sector. He gets very close to the outside wall on the exit of the last corner. Those drivers trying to get on the power as soon as they can for quite a long run to the line, and he beats Verstappen's time by 3 thousandths of a second.
Now, if this continues all the way through, then we can forget Bahrain and go, excellent, Formula 1 2024 starts right here. But of course, track evolution will be massive throughout the rest of this weekend, and we will go under the lights as well into the night time in Saudi Arabia around this Jeddah Corniche circuit. But a very nice lap time, a 1:30.011 from Russell. 3 thousandths clear of Max Verstappen. Norris, Sainz, Albon the top 5, Perez, Leclerc, Alonso, Hamilton, Piastri the top 10, Ocon, Sargent, Gasly, Ricciardo, Bottas the top 15, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Joe, Hulkenberg and Stroll, who is now back out on track after having a little coming together with the wall and some work being done in his Aston Martin garage. He's on an out lap now. Charles Leclerc on a quick lap on the soft compound tyre in his Ferrari off the back of some brake temperature issues in Bahrain, which caused a huge amount of locking up for the Monegasque, which rather put pay to any progression he was able to do. He managed to come home in fourth behind his teammate Carlos Sainz, who kicked off his final season for Ferrari with a podium. But Leclerc showing good pace in that Ferrari as he screams through turn 15 into the right-hander of 16. Then it's a quick left-hand through 17. The Haas in front moves out of the way. And your eyes must be on stalks the entire time you're heading around this track, Jack.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why they had opened up some of the bends on the very long straights here, curved straights that we have, because it's so difficult to look far enough ahead to spot the many slow cars that are getting in Leclerc's way. It's obviously happy hour for those quali simulations as many cars are on their outlap, but trying to get enough vision far enough ahead is extremely difficult at these speeds. But he navigates all of them. He had a slightly slower sector 2, perhaps due to some of that traffic, and crosses the line 9 tenths behind Russell. His last sector was actually pretty decent as well.
Yeah, about a second covering the top 11 as it currently stands. Lewis Hamilton has just gone up into fourth spot. Sergio Perez on an outlap in his Red Bull as Hamilton actually just goes rather deep coming through turn 1 and decides to bail out of that one and cuts the corner. Perez, that second Red Bull, the pressure that brings, he's got pressure on him for this season. He knows he's got to up his performances. 5th place qualifying in Bahrain, made his way through to second in the race. Over 20 seconds behind his teammate Max Verstappen, though, who many people believe wasn't really pushing to the full extent of that RB20's possibility. Do you think that was a good start to the season for Sergio Perez or not?
My honest answer is not really. I think he's caught a little bit of a break in that over the winter, memories fade a little bit of just how far off at times he was in the second half of last year when those questions of his security at that second seat of Red Bull started to come up. It's a bit of a fresh start for him, but yeah, he was really far behind Max yet again, and he was able to bring home that second place finish, which is kind of the minimum that I think Red Bull are looking for when the car is as dominant as it is, but the gap is still too big. Like you said, this is a circuit that he's done really well at the past, so this is a really good chance for him to hit back at Max when he really needs to, and we're on board with him now. He's just had sector 1 on his soft tyre run, and it's not too bad, but it's not purple. Coming through the middle sector towards the very fast turn 22, lots of cars on their outlaps, but none of them getting in the way. No major issues, but he is quite a way down. He's 6 tenths off George Russell.
Yeah. The reason I bring that all up is I was reading a lot of articles in between where some journalists were, and I won't name names on this occasion, but saying that was a great weekend for Perez, and I just couldn't get I just couldn't get my head around it, because I thought, well, yeah, he's finished second, the bare minimum, but he's still over 20 seconds behind.
Yeah, I think it is that kind of a reset, like we spoke about. It's taken a bit of the pressure off. It was building through last season, and he kind of got away with it. He managed to bring it back a bit right before the end of the season. Here's Max on the radio.
Okay, just one thing. I had some weird engine behavior in turn 13 and it's a little bit later in the lap. Like when I was off track, the car was jumping a lot.
So some weird engine behaviour. So turn 13 and a little bit later when he was off the throttle. So turn 13 is the banked left-hander that brings the cars back around on themselves, and then a little bit later on the lap. What did you make of that message, Jack?
It's something that's the kind of message that you get from a driver when they're maybe not entirely sure exactly what's happened, but something was different or something was not quite right. And these guys are so in tune with the car that those small differences jump out at you, and it's worth mentioning. And the guys back in the garage have so much more data available that if you flag it, there's a chance that they can find it. Obviously, it doesn't seem to be affecting him too much. He's just gone P1 by 3.5 tenths with a purple sector 1 and sector 3, but still not faster than Russell in sector 2.
No, interesting. Never started on the front row here as Max Verstappen, and indeed, he's had a couple of reliability issues in qualifyings here in the past. His drive shaft failure in qualifying last year, clipped the wall in qualifying in 2021, which has meant that his teammate Sergio Perez has taken pole on the last two occasions. And Perez speaking in the build-up to this weekend about his season last year and the difficulties of it, highlighting his lack of progression throughout the course of a weekend, and how crucial, I suppose, Jack, that momentum is to build up from FP1 into FP2 and just get off to the right start.
Yeah, it's something that the best drivers do really well, because in this age where you have so much data available to you, to the drivers as well, when they get out of the car, it's very easy to look at what your teammate's doing. So, you know, in Checo's position, where he's fighting his own teammate, he can go back and study what's happened in the first sessions and learn from it, from Max. But if you can't keep making those steps proactively, preemptively, as it were, then you're always going to be a bit behind. And the other thing that is, at the start of the weekend, the best drivers, a lot of them, Max included, tend to have a habit of building into it a little bit more gradually. They don't give everything straight away. They're out there learning corner by corner, playing with a few things, trying different stuff, and then they put it all on the table when it really matters. Whereas other drivers may just be trying to do 100% every time from the word go. And it's a different approach, but it's one that can leave you wanting when it gets to the crunch time.
Well, at the moment, Perez down in fifth, 7.5 tenths off of his teammate Max Verstappen, who currently tops the session. But it is only FP1, and the track still acclimatising, and everybody's still dialing in to their cars, and indeed dialing in to spatial awareness around this track, as Verstappen and one of the RBs nearly come a bit too close for comfort. The RB in front of the Red Bull of Verstappen, and Verstappen just having to ease off the throttle there. But so easy around any kind of street track, really, to try and find space. Yeah. Qualifying's going to be fun. I
mean, this is one of the worst, because the speed differential between a car that's warming up or cooling down from their hot lap to one that's going flat out is massive. And you have so many corners where your line of sight is quite short, especially when you're looking in a really shaky mirror on a Formula One car. The drivers just don't have that much capacity to look out for the cars behind them, and that's when their engineer really has to be helping them and in their ear constantly when the faster cars are coming behind them.
We haven't talked about Haas yet. It's the other one on my tick list to get through off the back of Bahrain. Pleasantly surprised. They seem really happy. I think Hülkenberg said he was about 7 to 8 on the optimism scale come the end of Bahrain, despite his incident with Stroll in turn 1. Magnussen came through the field and had a good race, finishing ahead of the RBs. Before last season, it seemed that qualifying they could produce, Hülkenberg certainly could, one lap pace, but their tyres would be their Achilles heel. They are tentatively optimistic, I think, coming into this season now, that they're not going to be plumb last, because Alpine seem to have taken that spot.
For now, yeah. I mean, as we say, the picture is still forming, and even
we need a bigger sample size.
We really, do, yeah. Scientifically significant sample. Even Haas themselves made the point that it was a positive start, but we don't know if the tyre issues are truly behind us, and we need a couple more races to see. But it was an encouraging performance. You know, I think Hülkenberg himself was saying that were it not for that first lap clash, he was feeling pretty optimistic about their pace, and he felt like they could fight in the midfield, which they couldn't last year. So They are currently 19th and 20th.
At the moment they are last.
We'll hope that's just an FP1 insignificant leaderboard situation, but we're going to see. It will be interesting to see how things turn out. They haven't run soft tyre yet, which obviously helps. But yeah, we'll be watching them.
Yeah, they're both in the pits at the moment. Hulkenberg ahead of Magnussen. Magnussen, who's scored points in Saudi Arabia in the last 2 years in a row. So does tend to like this track. Magnussen's had some good overtaking opportunities and moves over the last couple of seasons. Further up though, Charles Leclerc back on a fast lap. Currently in 7th. He's back out there on the soft compounder tyre. Personal best in Sector 1 and Sector 2 as he blitzes through the slight left-hand kink of turn 26. That is a DRS zone that brings you into the final corner, turn 27. Out on the exit and to the line he goes. And worth actually pointing out, because we had this issue last year, so Leclerc goes third, just over 3.5 tenths off of Verstappen. It's Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz and Norris, the top 5, by the way. Do you remember last year the white line as you that separates the pit lane entry and the track? All the drivers told, you can't go on that. You'll just get your lap time deleted. Logan Sargent in the Williams was on a blinder of a lap, would have got him into Q2, and it would have out-qualified Alex Albon. And then he just tagged that white line, and he never really looked like he was going to out-qualify Alex Albon for the rest of the season. Indeed, he didn't. He's currently 13th fastest, 1.3 seconds off. Albon about 3 tenths quicker than him on current form. It's a big year for Sargent, isn't it? And I suppose maybe there's a bit of confidence coming into this kind of track where he knows he was genuinely quick last year.
You'd hope so, yeah. I think Logan's had a tough first season, his Leclerc.
The track, it's like Mario Kart. There's like plastic bags everywhere.
Plastic bags and banana peels for Charles Leclerc to navigate around this Jeddah Corniche circuit. Yes, we have seen a few plastic bags get sucked underneath these cars and then spat back out again. But they've got to be careful, because you get that in a side pod, it can really do some damage.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that gets flagged pretty quickly, that they'll see the temperatures rising and pull the car in. But through the race, that's obviously less of an option. So hopefully it's not as bad by then. But yeah, Sargent, he does need... he needs to get some momentum going his way, because he's still trailing Albon almost every session, and he's come into the season with a lot of positivity. Said that he's changed his training regimen from last year. He's gained quite a bit of weight, actually.
Yeah, about 5 kilos.
Yeah,
in muscle.
Yes, yeah. We should clarify that's not the Christmas ham. That is muscle.
Same here. 5 kilos,
yeah,
pure muscle.
Exactly. Yeah, aren't we all? But he's making changes to try and pitch himself forward and get in the fight, really, because he's not been so far. Be interesting to see if he can carry that good qualifying form from last year into this year. And Leclerc has just come into the pits to finish his run, but also get rid of the remaining shreds of bag that are attached to the front of his suspension. So luckily not into any of the ducts, but yeah, their obstacle course out there that they're having to dodge.
Certainly is. Fully wrapped around the front left suspension bars for Charles Leclerc, and then removed very handily by one of the mechanics back in the Ferrari garage.
It's much easier to remove than bits of bunny rabbit, I can tell you from personal experience.
Oh no!
Yeah.
In a sports car?
No, from an open wheeler. My first ever day in a single seater, no less. Yeah, that was.
Did you see it and then just couldn't get out of the way last minute, or was it not until you came back to the garage?
No, I saw everything and then some. Yeah, wouldn't recommend that experience.
Scarred for life.
Hasn't turned me veggie yet, but perhaps I should review that for my crimes against.
Was there a lot of damage to the car?
It actually bent the suspension. Yeah, it was a day ender for me on the little airfields that we were using as a test ground that day. But the mess was something else. Anyway, this is a bit gruesome. Let's move on.
That poor rabbit. Yeah, it's free practice 1, sun shining over the Jeddah Corniche circuit. That was the voice of Jack Aitken, who has had some racing experiences in his time, let me tell you, and is of course a former Formula 1 racer, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, and the BBC chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. I honestly think, you know what, we peaked in terms of broadcast. broadcasting there. 11 minutes and 4 seconds remain of FP1.
Maybe that's why I've moved to closed cockpit cars. Anyway, moving on.
Got a windscreen. Verstappen's fastest, 2/10 clear. Sergio Perez is in second. Russell, Leclerc, Sainz the top 5. Norris, Hamilton, Stroll, Albon, Bottas the top 10. Ocon, Alonso, Sargent, Piastri, Gasly the top 15. Joe, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg and Magnussen at the top 20. And as I do the rundown, Fernando Alonso goes closest within Verstappen's range, just over a tenth and a half back from the reigning champion as he crosses the line. And that last lap from Fernando Alonso was a 1:29.845.
It's quite a tidy lap. It looked pretty nice and smooth by all accounts, so not wrestling the car too much, which is exactly what you want around here. You need a bit of a confidence-inspiring car, because if you get a snap at the wrong time, as we've said, it's pretty terrifying, and you lose an exponential amount of time having to correct it. So looks pretty rosy so far for Fernando.
10 minutes remaining of FP1 then. So we've seen all three tyre compounds out on track at some stage, the soft, the medium and the hard. Pirelli providing the middle of the range tyre for this weekend, and because the track surface is quite smooth here, not expecting degradation to be too high. But what's your sense of what the teams and drivers have learned so far from this FP1 session, bearing in mind the conditions will of course change as we get further and later into the day?
I think for a lot of them, this FP1 is just a chance, as always, to get an initial read of the car, but especially at a street circuit like this one, it also proves as a time to really double down on trying to get confidence with your car, more so than other places that might be a bit more forgiving. Here you will need to have a car with a certain balance that you can trust and that you can really commit to. So the guys will be working hard to make sure that they have that going into probably more significant FP2, where track conditions are a little bit more representative for what they're going to be racing.
Oscar Piastri on a lap at the moment, coming through the first sector. He's on the soft compound of tyres. He's currently 14th fastest, and just is not going for anything quick at the moment. His fastest lap time is about 1.3 seconds off at the moment, and Piastri actually had a really good run in qualifying here last year. He made it through to Q3, out-qualified his teammate Lando Norris, and then didn't finish the race in the points though. Run around here in his Formula 2 days though, so has some good memories of this track, does Piastri, and a second season for the Aussie after a good rookie year. And I think they seem like a great pairing in terms of on track they deliver, and off track they seem like they get on quite well. But do you think there's any chance that, that is Norris's team right now, but he's got to look over his shoulder a bit at Piastri?
I think definitely he had a brilliant rookie season by all accounts. Not just new to the team as it were, but new to F1, and I think that gets forgotten because he just did so well and was putting himself in the fight very often against Lando. Often race pace was his Achilles last year, and it's something that he said that he's worked on and is really improved. Bahrain again, he was impressive and won that pace and had a bit of a slip back in the race, but was still up there, so he'll be looking to keep building on that. And in your second season, it's almost harder in some ways than when you're a rookie, because you don't get cut as much slack, I think. And not that Oscar will need it, I'm sure, but he's really going to have to keep kicking on and show that he deserves to have co-leadership of that team as much as Lando.
Yeah, and what is a bit of a worry and something to keep in the back of, particularly on Lando Norris's side of the garage, is that he had to take a second energy store and control electronics within his power unit allocation in race one. And that is that will have knock-on effects further down the line. 24 races in this year, a penalty that might well likely come his way later in the year if he has to make another change.
Absolutely. I mean, even if you don't end up taking that penalty, there are other compromises that have to be made. You have to run certain components to a higher mileage than you really want. It's just a stress that you don't need, and to have to take that knock in the very first race must be frustrating for them.
Well, at the moment, The two McLarens, Norris in 7th and Piastri down in 15th. It's Verstappen still fastest, Alonso, Perez, Russell, Leclerc the top 5, and everybody is out on the track with the exception of Perez in the Red Bull, Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, and Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber. They are all currently in the pits, and everybody else out there on a lap or on an out lap, including Kevin Magnussen, who currently finds himself 20th and last, and he is just beginning a new lap. He's out there on the medium compound of tyre, and still yet to have a go, I think, on the soft compound tyre. I don't think they've stuck that on yet, and I wonder if this is just a reconfirmation from Haas and new team principal Ayao Komatsu's they want to get the most out of these tyres. They want to understand them, because if they can get on board with the tyres, everything else should really fall into place.
Yeah, it's just them, and I believe the God, here we go. Red Bull Visa Cash App team. That is, I didn't even get that right, did RB.
No sponsor names, please, Mr. Aitken.
Well, drivers never get this right. Yeah.
You get one pass.
all right.
RB Apologies. And Sauber. Okay.
But when I say RB, especially in a race scenario, it sounds like, I think is it a restaurant chain in America, like Arby's, or and to me that sounds terrible.
I'm in favour of calling them RBs.
I think I personally would call them racing balls, but everybody
anyway
for RB. As you were saying,
RB and Haas are the only two that haven't run that soft tyre so far, choosing to do their hot laps on the medium so far and the hard at the start of the session. So just saving some of their allocation for a bit later on, when temperatures are a bit cooler and it's going to be a bit closer to what they're expecting in quali anyway. That's possibly the game that they're playing there.
Other chains, etc., are of course available. Just clear ourselves of that.
Haas are sponsored by Chipotle, so we could call them Chipotle.
Let's steer well clear now. Let's steer well clear. In the Haas, he comes across the line, and not pushing for time, it's Kevin Magnussen, and the two Haas's are 19th and 20th. Gunther Steiner was actually in the paddock last week in Bahrain doing some punditry work after departing the Haas team. His contract not renewed by Gene Haas, and now Ayao Komatsu, who steps up from technical role.
Don't worry about it.
So that was Logan Sargent on the radio, bleeped out what he actually said, because he got rather close to one of the Ferraris, Jack, didn't he, coming through Sector 1?
Yeah, and at one of the higher speed points as well. It was on the exit of turn 11, where you're full tilt and trying to avoid both a wall and a curb, and the Ferrari was just out on the racing line, so it's not ideal. But, quick reactions from Sargent left him without any issues.
They're gaining a track and leaving the track and gaining an advantage, I should say. Can be quite easily done, especially around a street circuit, if you are given that one bit of margin and the wall is set back slightly. But track limits is a conversation time and time again within Formula One. Previously and historically, you're given a 5-second time penalty added onto your race lap time. Now it seems like the race control are going to be a little bit harder with a 10-second time penalty as almost the minimum. Do you think that is the right way to go? Because previously it just seemed like, I think it was here last year. No, perhaps a different track actually. But the Perez in a Red Bull can get a penalty, and he overtook Alex Albon, left the track and gained an advantage. 5 seconds for the Red Bull of Perez is not really a penalty versus the Williams of Albon, is it?
Yeah, we've seen it a couple of times, I think, where teams have almost made that strategic decision to take the clean air with an illegal overtake by going out of track limits and jump out and make that gap, even if it's going to give you that 5-second penalty, because they're confident that they can outrun it effectively. So the 10-second shift is just to try and dissuade them from doing that and keep things all legal and above board.
Whatever happened to the drive-through penalty? I feel like I haven't seen one of them in years.
It's been a while, hasn't it? I think that's a pretty grievous offence these days, so I'm not sure what's required. Like you say, we haven't seen it in a long time.
No. Well, maybe we've jinxed it now, haven't we? Into the closing stages of this opening practice session as Formula One arrives in Saudi Arabia at the Jeddah Corniche circuit for round 2 of 24. We're on the waterfront area next to the Red Sea on the second longest track on the calendar. 27 turns, 16 to the left, 11 to the right, which make up the track with the most amount of corners on the calendar, just over 6 kilometres in length. Designed by son of Herman Tilke, and came onto the calendar in 2021, and talk in the build-up to this week of a new track that's been designed by former F1 driver Alexander Wirtz that could well become the home of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in years to come.
Piastri removing some of his McLaren over the exit curve of turn 11 there. It was pretty aggressive, but luckily for him, all keeps it 4 wheels pointing forwards. And we had a massive crash there with Logan Sargent a while ago when he got on that very same curve. It wasn't qualifying when speeds were a bit higher, but it's a dangerous one that the guys have to watch out for sure.
Yeah, it really is, and can really let the sparks fly on the underside of these Formula One cars. Sargent then coming through turn 15, slight left-hander. Then you get into turn 16 and 17, a quick right, then a left-hander. The sun shining down on the blue liveried Williams, the American, in his second season of Formula One with a point to prove up against the highly regarded Alexander Albon. Sargent finished 20th and last in Bahrain after issues with his steering wheel, and never really was able to recover from that, hoping for a better run of it this time at a track where it looked like he could have out-qualified his teammate last year on pure pace. He'll be hoping to try and complete that again this time around. One final corner for Sargent out of turn 27, and across the line. He's not really pushing for lap time. He stays in 14th. In fact, nobody is pushing for lap time. Cars taking the checkered flag, and that is the end of free practice 1. And it's Max Verstappen who is fastest, a 1:29.659 on the soft compound of tyre, just over a tenth and a half clear of Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. The other Red Bull of Sergio Perez is third. The Mercedes of George Russell is fourth. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari rounds out the top 5. Then it's Sainz, Norris, Hamilton, Stroll, Albon, the top 10, Bottas, Ricciardo, Ocon, Sargent, Piastri, the top 15, Tsunoda, Gasly, Zhou, Hülkenberg and Magnussen, the top 20 to end the first bit of track running to kick off the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend. And Jack, just before we wrap up, final thoughts, takeaway from this opening session?
Potentially close at the front. I mean, we have to see when conditions are a bit closer to they will be in quali, but the Red Bulls have got competition potentially in the form of Mercedes and Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso.
Well, we shall wait to see how the picture unfolds throughout the rest of this weekend as the sun slowly starts to go down, and we'll get under the lights here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. My thanks to the BBC Chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, to Jack Aitken. I've been Harry Benjamin, and you can join us again for Free Practice 2. That's on 5 Sports Extra from 5 to 5. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.